Well, dozens of Christian church leaders and members have been arrested in China in recent months. Advocates fear the persecution of Christians is intensifying in the country. So what's behind this latest crackdown by the Chinese government? Max Walden is a reporter with ABC Asia Pacific News and has been covering the story and joins me now. Max, firstly, what sort of crackdown are we seeing in China more recently? How are Christian churches, leaders and their members being targeted there?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, in recent months, it appears there's been at least two sort of major crackdowns. One against the Zion Church and its pretty influential leader, with around 30 arrests of members of that church back in October. A US organization, China Aid, has said it's the largest kind of crackdown on one particular church in decades. And then earlier this month, we saw another church, the Early Rain Covenant Church, be targeted as well, with I think around 8 or 9 of its church leaders and members arrested. So yeah, certainly this has been seen widely by Christian groups that monitor this from abroad, and indeed from Christians within China, as indicative of kind of a broad crackdown.
Yeah, has there been a reason given as to why the members and leaders of those churches have been arrested and have they been charged?
Yeah, so as always with things to do with the law in China, it's a little bit opaque, but we understand that at least one of the members of the Early Rain Covenant Church has been accused of national security related offences. Generally speaking, I think historically a lot of church leaders have been targeted for seemingly more benign offences like tax evasion or running an illegal business. And in the case of the Zion Church, I understand that a number of those church leaders have been charged under internet-related offences. Of course, China controls the online space very closely, and churches, of course, in the modern era, use online spaces to do sermons and to communicate with their members. So it appears as though in the case of the Zion Church, it's been that's the tactic of officials, is to kind of go through information related laws.
Yes, Max, are many of these church organizations operating underground beyond the two Christian groups that are officially recognized by the CCP?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, there's one Protestant and one Catholic organization that are sort of state endorsed, and what they preach is quite heavily controlled and monitored by the state. And it's understood that the state itself kind of acknowledges the existence of probably about 40 million Christians within China. I've heard that scholars estimate that's probably more like 90 million. Of course, Christian organizations outside of China put the estimate even higher. But certainly there are millions of members of what are often referred to as house churches or unregistered churches, where, yes, the teaching is done in a small facility like somebody's house, or even, of course, online, done to smaller with smaller groups of people, and generally, of course, not in line with the sort of state-sanctioned, approved teachings. In recent years, China's attempted to sort of retranslate the Bible into Chinese to make it more kind of palatable to authorities. So, there's an obvious impetus for people to, worship in a more independent way. But then the flip side of that is, of course, crackdowns like what we're seeing.
Yeah, so that begs the question, Max, why is China so threatened by Christianity? Well, what's happening in the background, and are there sort of wider geopolitical factors at play here in terms of targeting the Christian faith?
Yeah, I mean, the Chinese Communist Party has a long history. It's officially atheist. It's got a long history of hostility to organized religion. Of course, under President Xi Jinping, this is as sort of the crackdown against particularly faiths that are seen as foreign. So Islam and Christianity in particular. It's worth noting, by the way, that they've both been in China since about the 7th century and have fairly indigenized versions locally. But they are seen, given that their cultural centers are sort of outside of China, they're viewed certainly by the Xi Jinping regime as being foreign to China, and then thus given networks that Muslims or Christians within China may have with the outside world, that potentially poses some sort of national security threat. As mentioned earlier as well, there's around 90 million odd Christians, as scholars estimate. That's about the same number of members that the Chinese Communist Party has. So, of course, there are always fears around, different groupings that may be able to mobilize against the Chinese Communist Party or the government. So, yeah, there's a range of things happening here. However, it was mentioned to me by several people that I spoke to that it does seem as though these crackdowns on unregistered churches seem to happen when there is kind of external pressure on China. So, of course, China for some years now has had heightened geopolitical tension with the United States. Recently, Donald Trump has gone after several of China's close partners, including, bombing Iran last year, the extraordinary scenes we saw in Venezuela with the taking of Nicolas Maduro, and then, of course, now renewed protests in Iran and the US kind of talking big on potential, renewed military intervention. So yes, it's within this kind of broader geopolitical context that we believe that the crackdown on these churches is occurring.
Okay, Max Walden, thanks very much for shedding more light on this story.
Thanks, Girish.